The question of the pupil. You have indicated that there is a misinterpretation of the ideas given to Ouspensky by Gurdjieff and recorded in the book In Search of the Miraculous by Ouspensky about esotericism. Is that the word? Esoteric ideas. There is a misunderstanding, you say. Could you explain what this is about? Obviously, as ordinary men and women, we know nothing of this, except what we read in the book In Search of the Miraculous by Ouspensky. How do you interpret what is said in this book? The teacher replies, we see in this book that there are, shall we say, ordinary men and women, and then there are concentric circles or squares, concentric, and there is what Gurdjieff called to Ouspensky the exoteric level. There is the mesoteric level in the middle, and then there is actually the esoteric in the centre. And he says that monasteries are in the East are constructed according to this principle. That you have an outer wall, you can enter that under certain circumstances to the exoteric level. Then there is another wall, you enter that to the mesoteric level, and only very few arrive at the next level, the esoteric level. So this is what Gurdjieff said to Ouspensky. Have I summarised it reasonably well? You understand what I'm talking about. A similar situation exists in the West here when we look at the structure of monastic buildings. When we look even at churches, minsters, cathedrals, there are always these three divisions. There are those outside, and then there are three divisions. Exoteric, outer level, mesoteric, the middle level, esoteric, the inner core of what is going on. Now this is absolutely and totally misunderstood. And it's misunderstood by us because we have an education system. In my opinion, this is the reason we misunderstand this. So we go to school. Let's talk about the education system, because I'm drawing parallels between these two things and our understanding of these two things. And these parallels are not correct. There are those things that are obvious, which are not in fact obvious, and are not correct. So, if we consider our education system, you go to primary school, you go to kindergarten, and you learn certain subjects. And then you go to secondary school or tertiary school, as we sometimes say, whatever. But secondary school, and you're learning the same subjects, but the assumption is that we are learning the same subjects, but just at a more profound level. So we're studying in primary school, in our kindergarten, we study sums, adds, takeaways, shares, times bys. And we assume that at secondary school we're learning the same thing, it's only more complex. We might use, instead of just numbers, 24 shared by 3, we might use algebra, letters, x's and y's, and z's, and ABCs, and what have you. It's the same thing at a more profound level. And then we go on to university, and I study mathematics at university. And it's the same thing, you've still got the adds, the takeaways, the share buys, and so on. But it's much more profound. And this is our education system. So this leads to an assumption that is happening in this esoteric picture that Gurdjieff gives to Ouspensky is that we enter from ordinary life, the exoteric. We move to the mesoteric, and then on to the esoteric. And we are, in a sense, it is the same teaching, only more profound. Excuse me. It is the same teaching, only more profound. Or more complex as well. But this is an assumption that we are making. And this is where this idea, all the ideas that are expressed in Search of the Miraculous, this is where they go wrong. This is where Ouspensky goes wrong. He misinterprets and misunderstands everything, in fact, that Gurdjieff told him. Because there are these assumptions in the back of our mind that are unquestioned. And yet, this is not what Gurdjieff is talking about. This is not what happens. So, in reply to your question, the ordinary man or woman can enter this teaching, the exoteric level. And there is a teaching. And the teaching is that teaching that Gurdjieff was giving to Ouspensky. Ouspensky misinterpreted and misunderstood it, but we can find out what it is because Gurdjieff wrote his own book. Ouspensky has recorded exactly what Gurdjieff said to him. And so, where these, in a sense, overlap, we can say, this is what Gurdjieff was teaching. And what he was teaching is fairly straightforward. It's the exoteric level. The ordinary man or woman takes their psychology and their social position and their social life and everything that happens as if that is normal. And what Gurdjieff is saying is that our psychology, is totally abnormal. And our the social structures and the social world in which we live in is totally abnormal. We don't recognize it. You can see this in Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, where everything is described. Every other word becomes, bizarre, peculiar. We are slugs. We are strange. We are abnormal. We live in the abnormal, external conditions of ordinary being existence established by us ourselves. So, and so on. So, Gurdjieff is pointing out in this exoteric level the abnormalities in our lives, that we are totally abnormal. We don't recognize this immediately. It has to be pointed out. And then Gurdjieff is talking about man the machine. A machine is a complex device made by man in order to perform a specific function or functions, and it always has an operator. So by saying man the machine, Gurdjieff is defining the extent of his teaching. It's not all and everything. It's a very limited teaching. It's saying we're looking at man, the machine, not the operator of the machine. We're not looking at psychology. But I'm talking about psychology, says Gurdjieff, because it's totally abnormal. Why is it abnormal? Because of the machine. It's as if we have a machine that doesn't work properly. And so the operator of the machine has to adapt his behaviour to that fact in order to get the job done. So the operator of the machine behaves abnormally. Not because the operator of the machine is abnormal, but because the machine doesn't work properly. And so this is the exoteric teaching that Gurdjieff was giving. The machine doesn't work properly. We are trapped in, and this is moving on in a sense, but we are trapped in internal structures from which we cannot escape. And as a result, we create the abnormal conditions of external ordinary being existence established by us ourselves. We create conditions, we create an abnormal psychology because the operator of the machine has to adapt to the imperfections in the machine. It's not the fault of the operator, so it's no good studying psychology, and this is what we come to in this exoteric level. It's no good trying to change the operator of the machine. Because the operator of the machine is abnormal. We must recognize this. But the operator of the machine is abnormal because the operator of the machine is adapting to the imperfections in the machine. The cause is the fact that the machine does not work properly. And this is the exoteric level. So we're not changing psychology. Any attempt to change ourselves does not work and only makes our situation worse. This is Gurdjieff's teaching. Because that's not the problem. That's not the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem, in fact, we realise, is that there is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. We don't have the energies we should have. We fall to a very low energetic level. And we become trapped in structures, internal structures, from which we cannot escape. We cannot maintain ourselves. Gurdjieff says we don't exist. We cannot maintain ourselves as distinct from these structures. We fall into these structures, and as a result, we can't get out of them. We can't maintain ourselves outside these structures, and so inevitably, as a result of this, we have an abnormal psychology. Well, we can't correct the abnormal psychology. We can't do anything about an abnormal psychology by psychological means, because that's not the cause. And this is what Gurdjieff is teaching, the exoteric level. This is Gurdjieff, a teacher. But then there is, according to what we were speaking about earlier, there is the mesoteric level, which is a completely different teaching. And this is what I'm pointing out to you. The assumption is that, in a sense, the exoteric, the mesoteric and the esoteric are the same teachings, just more profound. But this is not true. They're completely different directions, completely different teachings, almost no connection between them. The only connection between them is that you must understand the previous level or levels. So if you understand the exoteric level, then you can work at the mesoteric level. But if you don't understand the exoteric level, if you're in the Gurdjieff tradition, for example, which doesn't understand this, you can't go to the mesoteric level because you don't understand the previous level. And the mesoteric level has nothing to do, it's not a linear development from previous levels. It has nothing to do with the previous levels. So, if I go back to your question, the assumption that we have is that the movement through these esoteric levels, exoteric, ordinary life, exoteric level, mesoteric, esoteric, the movement through these is the same teaching, only more profound. And it's not. The reality is that you go from ordinary life into the exoteric. It's telling you something completely new, completely different, completely opposite direction. The ordinary man assumes it's possible for them to develop in some way in the course of their life. But the exoteric level says any attempt to change ourselves does not work and only makes our situation worse. And it explains why. Because the cause remains unchanged. The cause is we live excuse me, in internal structures. We've fallen into internal structures from which we cannot escape. So we have an abnormal psychology. But the psychology is not the cause, it's the effect. So we can't change it. If we change it, it will just revert back to what it was. So what I'm saying is there is an illusion that we can progress through these esoteric levels in some way, and it's just the same teaching becoming more profound. But this is not true. It is a complete change of direction, a complete stop at each level. The ordinary man entering the exoteric teaching, it's a complete stop. You can't develop in any way. Any attempt to change yourself does not work and only makes your situation worse. So what are you going to do? When you ask that question, genuinely ask that question, you're ready perhaps to move to the mesoteric level, where there is an answer to the question. There is a break in the chain of energetic production in us. We do not have the energies, the food of impressions coming from perception as we should. We have an excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. So the mesoteric level is concerned with disrupting, bypassing, overcoming this excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. But that has nothing to do with the exoteric level or ordinary life. So in answer to your question, I've probably forgotten the question by now, but essentially we have this illusion that there is a gradual progression through these layers, but in fact it's not. It's a zigzag course. Change of direction, change of understanding, change of background at each level. Totally different teachings. And of course, Ouspensky was at the exoteric level. Gurdjieff was teaching him that far from being normal, as the ordinary man and woman assumes, far from being normal in terms of our psychology and in terms of our social life, we live in a totally abnormal situation. Our psychology is totally abnormal. Our social arrangements and so on are totally abnormal. But we can't change them by psychological means. And of course Gurdjieff himself was at the mesoteric level. He was a pupil at the mesoteric level, and hence teaching at the exoteric level. And this is quite clear from what he said, and quite clear from the biographies and the background information we have of Gurdjieff. He was a complete idiot. But he was working at the mesoteric level. That is to say, remedying the break in the chain of energetic production in us. Why do we have this break in the chain of energetic production in us? Because the food of impressions coming from perception does not sound in us as it should. It's not digested. We don't have the energies we should have. Why is it not digested? Because we have an excellently working automatism for perceiving all kinds of new impressions. So Gurdjieff was working at the mesoteric level. And this is quite evident. And then there is the esoteric level, which we can assume and does not exist anymore. In 1903 there was the Young Husband expedition, and those involved in the esoteric level were, you can read Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. They no longer existed from 1903 onwards. Of course this level will be re-established, or has been re-established. We don't know anything about it. Gurdjieff was a pupil at the mesoteric level and teaching at the exoteric level. That's what we know. And we just have to work within those parameters. So, has that answered your question? Has that clarified anything? I'm not at my best today, as you can see.